Everybody, welcome to a new show called Worth Fighting For, where we're going to be recapping new episodes of HBO's The Last of Us. I'm Brian Marr, and I'm joined, as I will always be, by Tamar Kutab. Tamar, how you doing?
Good. I'm really excited to talk about The Last of Us. It's one of my favorite franchises. Used to be, I could just say it's one of my favorite video games, and I can say
Mm-hmm.
franchises
Yes,
in the world. So yeah, I'm excited to talk about it.
me too. It was, the game 2013, complete game changer. I feel like, before that there were other zombie games, of course. There were, the Resident Evils being the most famous one, but I think what set this one apart was the acting, the performances by Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, and I think the story in general, and then the acting performances are well represented here. Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey really took the torch and are running with it, and the story is very good and very compelling, I feel. Man, I'm interested to get your opinion as a big fan of the game, like you said, I guess of the games in general, but of the franchise now. Without going too far into spoilers for maybe people who are just watching the show, what did you think of the adaptation?
I mean, okay, so in general, adaptations for me are really tricky to pull off, and a lot of times they really aren't. They don't live up to the original. I think The Last of Us is like a really unique example of, let's let's do what worked. Let's add a bit to it, but keeping Neil Druckmann at the helm, um, keeping a lot of the same, spirit of the original. A lot of the dialogue is like identical. Um, Characters, they're not adding a whole lot, but they are adding little key moments that count. I think they're going in the right direction with that. I mean, we've seen a lot of bad adaptations as well. You mentioned Resident Evil. I think that's like, I love them or hate them, they're nothing like the games. I think that's at least a fair assessment. And
Yes.
but I think in contrast, The Last of Us seems like they're doing it right. I think it is going to work out.
Yeah, and so obviously there were I want to say 8 movies, seven at least Resident Evil movies. I of course saw all of them, many of them in theaters. But yeah, I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. But I was a fan of those movies once I like kind of accepted that like they're not really like the game. They're just kind of like B horror movies, zombie movies, and they're fun if you don't take them seriously. But they certainly were not anything like the show. I haven't seen Welcome to Raccoon City, which is a new like movie on Netflix, which seemed like it was going to be more like at least the second game. Um,
Mhm.
Again, haven't seen it yet, and then I did not watch the Netflix show because it got very bad reviews, and one of the main things was it seems like this was a zombie show that had its own thing going on, and at the last second, they're like Resident Evil, slap that Umbrella Corporation logo all over the place, and that's what this is, a Resident Evil adaptation. Uh, yeah,
No, I
so
think that's often what happens. Whereas I do feel like with this, maybe it's just the nature of HBO. I feel like HBO has a really good track record with these kinds of things, in terms of giving the creative people just freedom,
mm,
creative control. Um, so clearly, with this show, from the ground up, it was built to be a Last of Us adaptation, not just hey, let's plug a zombie hole in our programming.
mm,
It's about the story first, which is
mm,
what Last of Us is about. It's yes, it's set in a zombie apocalyptic world, but the moments you always recall when you think back at these games is like those interconnections between the
mm.
characters.
Yeah, I think perhaps television is like the ultimate medium to tell the story, at least. Not to take anything away from the gameplay, especially The Last of Us Part Two still blows me away with how like complex all the interactions, all like the animations are insane, absolutely
Yeah.
insane video game. But yeah, the story, like you said, it is definitely the strongest story in video games. I don't think that's too much of a
Yeah.
hot take. I'm sure people will disagree with me. People have their own, opinions.
I don't know, man. That
Yeah,
reveal at the end of Metroid from like
mhm,
1994,
yeah.
where it turns out Samus is a
As a
lady.
woman,
That's like
yeah,
doesn't get any better than that.
yeah.
No,
People
yeah, I think
mind blow.
that's fair.
Yeah,
That's a fair assessment.
and so from that aspect, I think it's the video game that most easily can be adapted. Certainly, there's others. People probably would have said The Witcher because it was a book series before it was a video game series. People have their own opinions on the Netflix adaptation of The Witcher.
Ugh,
That's for sure.
yeah,
Maybe
don't get me
Netflix just
started.
needs to not adapt video games.
Yeah,
I don't
could
know.
be. Yeah, I could go on a whole
Yeah,
rant about The Witcher, but we're not here for that. So
yeah. But in the course of adapting the show, I think one of the strongest things that they did was just the very beginning of the first probably half hour of the show. You really see the day one of the apocalypse, for lack of a better term, through Sarah's eye. And obviously, we know what Sarah's ultimate fate is going to be. We play the video game. You start out playing as Sarah as well. And I think the strongest thing that they did in this adaptation was you're seeing the world through her eyes. People are talking around her in a different language in Arabic. She doesn't understand Arabic. They're not subtitling it for you. So, ambulances are whizzing by in the background. They don't involve her. They're not a part of her world. We don't know what's happening. We know because we know what the show is. But like seeing everything kind of like gradually fall down and then collapse it on itself at the end of this like almost like short film basically to start off was really compelling. And I just what did you think of their decision to stick with Sarah as the POV character despite her fate and then extend her story beyond what it is in the game?
well, I mean, I think, sticking with Sarah's within her perspective was always a smart decision, in the original game as well as here. And I think adding these extra scenes, I would argue, was necessary because in the game, you are literally controlling someone, so you assume like, okay, this is me, this is my character, um, and they do a lot of storytelling within the game where you're like getting snippets from the TV and you know there's little there's things around the apartment you can get personality from these characters, but that's much harder to do in a TV show where you have a set amount of time. So like you said, putting it within her perspective where she's not getting the full picture. I mean, it's really clever, and I'm sure a lot of people who haven't played the games and are just visiting the series for the first time assumed this is okay. This is our main character for the entire series. And one of my favorite moments, just to pick out one little thing, was in the car. So, you know, this is like Code Red. They're driving. She's finding out that like people who go into the city get infected. That's like at least their first assessment, and she's realizing like in her head like, oh, I went to the city to get his watch fixed. So just that little moment of it just feels so true to like how a kid would be thinking about this, and that's something that's not in the game but really
Mhm.
works in making you feel like this is like a character I want to follow, and then
Yeah,
unfortunately
yeah,
see what happens.
yeah. And following like that, she's the first person who sees an infected person like that we see. Obviously, she has the interaction that she doesn't notice with like the grandmother is like clearly infected, but like it hasn't quite like taken
Oh my
over
god.
yet, and you're like, oh my god, what is going to happen? And then we see later, uh, poor Buddy Garrity from Friday Night Lights got his throat bit. Him and his wife, unfortunately, very nice neighbors. It seemed like they died, and I think it really sets the tone nicely because obviously she runs out of there. The dog is terrified of what it's seen, so that's like adding tension to the scene. Joel and his brother Tommy come back. Tommy's, from what we heard, he punched someone in a bar. Was that person infected and attacking someone? That's up to your own
Yeah.
interpretation. Maybe only Neil Druckmann knows for sure, I guess. But you know, they come. Obviously, they've seen other stuff happen. They're freaked out. They tell her to get in the car right now. There's another neighbor who's like, Joel, like, what is happening? Joel fucking hits the grandmother in the face with a wrench. That's terrifying. Then he runs over the other two infected. And I don't know if you saw, but in the background, as they're driving away, the neighbor who's like, Joel, what's happening? He's like, Joel, what the fuck? And like goes over to like try to help the
Right.
two.
Which is
And
natural.
yeah,
You
yeah,
would not just go into your house. You'd be like, why the hell did Joel just commit murder in the middle of
yeah,
the street and then drive off? And of course, like, we know as the audience, like, oh, like Jane's dead or whatever her name
yeah,
was.
right.
Yeah.
It just shows why Joel will be one of the people who are alive in the 20-year time, because he immediately was like, this is how shit is now. I'm like into it, I'm gonna do what I need to do to protect my family. Whereas, I think most people would have like a shock, in awe of the situation. So I think that really good characterization for Joel, like as the person who like steps up and does whatever it takes to keep the people he cares about safe, even if it's hitting an old woman in the face with a wrench.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, and I think they've added a lot to his at least so far they've added a lot of detail to his character. Um, you know, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but as a smuggler, in the game, he's a smuggler, but in the show they're really delving into this and showing like what he really is up to, which I like. It's kind of like the first Hobbit movie. It's like, did I need to spend an hour in Hobbiton? No, but
Yeah,
also I kind of like enjoyed it. I'm
right.
not like a huge fan of this as a series, but I don't mind this extra character development and everything.
Yeah, and so obviously we see like the real like fall of society in this, in a sequence that's pretty much taken directly from the video game, which is very cool to see them adapt this.
Mhm.
They added a little bit of flair. There's only a car crash in the game. There's a plane crash in this, which was
Yeah,
very exciting and
that's so
intense.
cool. Yeah.
Um, Also, holy shit. Well, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, in this, the zombies, the fungus is transferred through tendrils. I thought it was cool. I thought it was different. What's your thoughts on this method of transmission?
I was trying to figure that out. And yeah, I was like actually on my to-do list to like look this up online because of
Mhm.
course, like when the old lady's like biting her daughter or whoever it is,
Yeah.
you see that sort of stuff coming out of her mouth. But my first thought was like, oh, she just like is biting her head, so it's like
Mm.
hair.
Right. Right.
So it didn't like register with me at first, but then I was like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I mean, I think whatever adds to the creepiness, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
The thing that I did love that they added was like, um, at one point they show this chart which says like, because this is like, if you jump 20 years, you're
Mm.
gonna figure some things out about this virus, or I guess technically not a virus, right? It's
Yeah. Fungus.
fungus, yeah.
Yeah.
So they realize like, okay, if you get bit in the neck or face, you have like minutes to live. If
Mm.
it's like the foot, you have like, I forget what it is.
I think it was like 24 hours. It was basically like
Yeah,
from here, as the further away from your brain you get
Mhm.
infected, the longer it takes to like get up to your brain and take hold.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And it's, it's it's a subtle thing, but it's also kind of necessary because we know that Ellie's bit, but she hasn't
Mm,
turned in
yep.
over that amount of time. So,
Yeah, very very necessary, like you said. But yeah, I really liked it. I think one of the more interesting parts of it is like these zombies infected, they don't seem to want to kill you. They seem to just want to bite you and then like
mm,
hang on and because like neither of the neighbors seemed to be dead. They were messed up. They were bitten like in the neck, but
right.
it feels like the fungus isn't it doesn't want to kill humans. It wants to just use them as a vector to spread itself like as far as and as wide as possible, which is a interesting take and kind of like maybe it was very similar in the games. I don't ever remember seeing like zombies necessarily like eating, and like dead bodies like that. You expect like say in The Walking Dead, a character gets just completely eaten.
Right.
Like the zombie is eating them. Like that's its
Yeah. They're like
thing.
distracted. So,
Yeah,
you can like almost
exactly.
sneak behind them.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems
I
like
mean,
in this, they'll bite them, and then if they see someone else, it'll be like, awesome, I'm gonna go
fresh
infect
host.
that person now too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if they're going to do this in the show, but I do remember one extremely creepy detail in the game where if you're stealthing through a mission and there are infected around,
Mm,
you can act if you like stick around long enough and you don't like kill them and you just kind of like wait to hear what they're like muttering. I mean, a lot
mm,
of times they're just like screaming, which is
yeah.
creepy in itself. But they actually do like say words and things,
Mm,
and it's so terrifying. Like if
yeah.
you're playing in the dark, you hear these zombies like actually saying words, which obviously is a very
Mm,
non-Walking Dead or even like a typical zombie thing. But it was kind of like on the internet it was kind of raising this argument of like, are these people even like still aware? Like what actually does the fungus do and what does
mm,
it want? Um, because like you said, it's not just trying to kill them and eat them
mm.
like a typical zombie. So I think yeah, you're right. They're leaving a lot of room for like some really creepy, some creepy, yeah, clicker moments.
Yeah, I've always definitely subscribed to the theory that the people are still alive, which adds like another layer of
Oh, yeah.
like you're not just killing zombies, like you're killing people who have no control over their body and like
Hmm.
they're attacking you. You don't want to attack you, but they just can't control it. And I mean, it showed too. Obviously the fungus controls the host. I don't feel like it can feel the pain of a host because like that
Mm.
runner that was chasing Joel and Sarah was just no regard for its own body whatsoever, just smashing through everything in an
Yeah.
attempt. And like, man, you watch The Walking Dead and you're like, all right, provided, I don't get super unlucky right away, I could probably make it a little while, in the
Yeah.
Walking Dead universe. I don't know. I don't know in this
Yeah.
universe. Like,
Oh no, yeah. I've always had a fear that like, you know, a lot of like people like us were interested in this genre and it's like
sure,
what
yeah,
would you
yeah.
do if it really happened? I have like a secret fear that like if this were to happen and it was Walking Dead style zombies, we would
Mm,
just like conquer it and be
mm,
cool. It would be like
yeah.
it'd be over in like a month and it'd just be like,
Right,
wasn't
yeah.
that weird when that happened?
Yeah.
It'd be easy to escape them and everything.
Mm,
Um, it's just like, yeah, like I hope. No, I don't actually hope this, but like it's more interesting when the zombies are just completely ruthless, like
yeah.
running at you. I mean, it was terrifying. Even just the one guy chasing after them as they're like trying to escape that building was
Yeah.
like I was holding my breath. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, imagine like fighting off one of these zombie and like maybe you do fight it off and you kill it. How exhausted you'd be after just
Yeah.
one zombie, Like, yeah, the people who are alive at this point after the 20-year time skip are like either they were born in like the apocalypse and like stayed in the walls like
Mm,
Ellie, or like they're pretty ruthless badasses, who like, they're the top 1% of like people who have like the will to survive.
yeah. Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And that's what I really loved about this first episode was you get a deeper sense of Boston. I mean, you
Mhm.
spent a little bit of time in the game there, um, but it really just serves as a place for the inciting incident to happen, and it's far enough, on the East Coast,
Mhm.
so it just adds like, I mean, being from Massachusetts, we
Yeah,
love that it's it's
yeah,
set
yeah.
there, but yeah, I loved that they added these little scenes, fireflies, little um, the radio guy.
Mhm.
I mean, maybe you want to talk about that a little bit more because I was like
Yeah.
I was like, oh wow, this is like really unique, and
Mhm.
I love the little color that it added.
Yeah. So first, let's talk Sarah. Obviously, very sad that Sarah dies
Oh,
here.
understood.
It's
Yeah,
tragic. Every time you play the game, it's tragic. Now this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've had to watch
I know.
Sarah get
I thought
shot.
my
Like,
throat was closing up. I was like,
yeah,
damn. And I knew
yeah,
it was coming too. It's just like, but they just did such an amazing job with like Pedro Pascal's performance is like gut wrenching.
yeah. So good. He is such a good actor. I remember when they were like casting for the role, they had like tons of names, of actors, and there are some good fan casts and obviously some bad fan casts. You know how that all goes. When they announced Pedro Pascal, I just remember being like, I never thought about him, but fuck yes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, he kills it.
100%. Couldn't agree more. I
Yeah.
think I think the casting all around, I'm really happy with. I do think people perhaps who haven't seen Game of Thrones, or I don't know. I feel like there's a small group who are gonna Bella Ramsey is gonna have to win them over,
Yeah.
but I'm like pretty confident that she will. We only got a small amount of Ellie in this first episode compared to Joel, but I do think she's gonna really win him over, especially knowing like Ellie's quirk and like her dialogue and everything. I think she's
Mhm.
gonna add that like that fun element to the
Yeah.
show. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Bella Ramsey was definitely like a scene stealer in Game of Thrones. And I feel like Bella will like bring that to this role also. And in some ways, they already have like the the scene when Tess and Joel like agree with Marlene, like, okay, yes, we're gonna take Ellie, we're gonna take her, where you need us to, and they like just throw Ellie like into a side room, and she's like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know, it just felt really like Ellie,
Yeah.
you know.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And yeah, the
100%.
attitude with like counting and flipping off the fireflies, like that was great.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Bella Ramsey's gonna kill it. Like you said,
Yeah.
give Bella a chance.
Yeah. Definitely.
That was the surprising thing to me too when people were why did the cast, Bella Ramsey doesn't look anything like Ellie from the game. It's like, okay, but like, did you watch Game of Thrones? Like,
Right. Yeah.
come on.
I think if you're always going to be like, oh, they look nothing alike,
Yeah.
you're like, I mean, it's not even like they look like nothing like. It's more so just like, oh, she doesn't look exactly like Ellie, and it's like, yeah, you're never gonna get like you're never gonna
Yeah.
get that 100%. And even if that's what you're aiming for over performance, it's never gonna be as good. It's really just isn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, hey, Andrew Lincoln doesn't look like how they draw Rick in the comics, but
No.
Andrew Lincoln is Rick Grimes. Like,
Yeah. No.
he
He's like
completely embodied the
one of my
role.
favorite parts of
Yeah.
that television series. He's like you said, he steals the scene every time he's in it as
Mhm.
well. So I think that's a great example.
Yeah. So I mean, the looks are one thing, but it's the actor behind the looks, really.
Mhm.
But yeah, so back we skip forward. We see um, a little kid who's infected. Again, we see you know, if you're bitten here, 1 hour, bitten here, 5 hours, bitten on the like 24 or whatever. The kid's infected, It shows how ruthless Fedra is. There's like no positive, dead
Yeah.
immediately, and then it was really effective. I felt like showing how Joel is just like very numb to the world now. Like he sees a little kid's body in at this point, he's just like, yeah, whatever. I'll throw it in the fire. Like, I don't care. Like, all he cares about is what job pays the most food stamps and,
Yeah.
you know, having enough food stamps and like favors and stuff to trade for some drugs and some alcohol so that he can sleep at night in this like hell world.
Exactly. And that's like that's another example of a scene that's not in the game but is
Mm,
very true to Joel's character in the game.
yeah.
It just adds that flavor for people who, are watching for the first time. And I don't know about you, but because obviously I knew Bella Ramsey was going to play Ellie, but did you also think that maybe this was like young Ellie and they were going to do like a second time jump, or did you know this was
Mm.
not Ellie and it was going
Oh, yeah. No, I didn't think that was Ellie. Just because I just that'd be kind of like a lot to be like, okay, I get what you're saying. Like maybe there'd be another sequence where it's like, here's Ellie and here's how Ellie gets, to
right?
the city. But I just thought like it was just a random kid, and then when the scene was kind of being set up, I was like, oh yeah, I see what they're doing. Oh,
Yeah.
we got to set up the infected. We got to set up Fedra as being like very like brutal if you test positive, and like showing that like, oh, we can test people and
Mhm.
find out if they're positive, which obviously pays off later
Yeah.
in the episode.
Yeah, and I do think there are like subtleties to it where people watching who haven't played the game perhaps are thinking like, oh, here's another like main character, or here's like,
Yeah.
this girl we're gonna follow. But like you said, it's actually just a setup for
Mm.
the world really, and also Joel's character.
Yeah, and I saw some people kind of like upset that Joel was like taking drugs and drinking.
Hmm.
I don't understand that. Like I think the things, obviously we know a little bit more like things Joel would have had to do to be alive at this point, like
Hmm.
on top of the trauma of his daughter dying in his arms.
Yeah.
I think you almost would need alcohol and drugs to just be able to like function, because if you're like feeling everything all the time and trying to go through this world, I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah, and if the world's gone to shit, it's like, why the hell not?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
At that point,
I'm worried about my long-term health.
yeah.
Like, really?
Joel's like a vegan. And he's
Yeah, yeah.
gluten free. Yeah,
Oh man.
but yeah, that's I like the little details that they've added.
Yeah. And it shows the world hasn't completely fallen. The Fedra agent that he's talking to is saying like, oh, in like, I think it was Atlanta. There's like still a factory that still makes
Right.
medication, and then we talked about it a long time. This is the long back around to what you mentioned earlier. There's a radio station where people are able to contact their family, because I mean, it's pretty normal today where like you have friends and family all across the country, and like, yeah, if something like this happens, you're not going back home. You're going to try to survive where you are,
Yeah.
and it's cool that they kind of showed like, yes, the world has fallen, but there still is civilization in all the like
Exactly.
madness.
Yeah, it shows that there's civilization. I think they actually show this better in the show than even the game,
Mm,
where like civilization still exists and there are, factions and you can contact your loved ones or people in other cities, but you can't go there. Like
yeah,
everything in between is dangerous. He mentions like there are worse things than
yeah,
the clickers. There are raiders. There
raiders,
are
slavers, yeah,
slavers. It's like brutal shit. And then, that's setting up like, okay, our characters are going to have to travel across this country and they're going to
yeah,
come across this stuff.
yeah.
So it's like kind of the perfect setup. And one thing I thought was interesting, I want to get your opinion on this, is like I don't think in the game you know about Tommy until you meet Tommy. Like you don't know that he's
Hmm.
still alive until you go there and you see him
Right,
in
right.
person. Whereas in this, they say it up front, like he's trying to contact Tommy, and this is actually giving him some incentive to
Hmm.
do this mission with Ellie.
Yeah, yeah. It was more in the game. It felt like, okay, we're gonna hand Ellie off to Fireflies, and then stuff happens, and then it's just kind of like, okay, my brother was a Firefly, which they mentioned in here.
Mhm.
That's like my next point of contact. Basically, is like I need to just get her to a Firefly. Where it's like you said, it's more like something has happened between Joel and Tommy. We don't know what yet in the show. Um, and Joel feels guilty about it. He wants to reconnect with his brother. So yeah,
Mhm.
like you said, maybe that'll be a motivation for him going forward. Um, I want to talk about Tess a little. I love the actress first of all. Huge fan
Yeah,
of her on
Fringe, right?
Fringe and
Yeah.
Mindhunter. Uh, she's great. When I saw that she was Tess, I was like, "Fuck yeah!" Like that's really good casting.
Mhm.
Um, I love that we get scenes of Tess just her, because being a video game, the limit of the medium for that, you're seeing everything through Joel's eyes now
Mhm.
at this point in the game. So you only see Tess through Joel's eyes, whereas like we get like a cool scene of her being interrogated, but not being like worried at all, more just being just fucking like let me go, you like fucking moron, who's sold by battery already, even though like I gave you all the stuff. Like I loved that. And I loved we hear about the Fireflies doing like bombings around the city during Joel's scene earlier, and that's how Tess gets out of here. Just what were your thoughts of Tess in this episode?
Well, it's funny because like you said, they show her like totally calm and collected amongst these other,
Mm,
sketchy characters, and yet once the wall blows in, and then it's this firefight between the Fireflies and Fedra, then you see she's actually like worried.
yeah,
It's kind of funny how you would think it would be the opposite for like any other character, but it's like very telling for her to be like, all right, among these other smugglers and like numbskulls, like
yeah,
it's all good. Like, she's like telling them like, I'll tell him whatever. Just like
mm,
it's all good, man. Like really, you don't have to worry. And yet it's like she's the one being interrogated. It's like, yeah, it's and yeah, it adds more to her character, And in the game, I love Tess, but I don't think you even get those scenes of like her getting, sleeping over
no,
Joel's and like them. You don't get a sense of them being like in this relationship that has perhaps been going on for a while. You just kind of get that they're like they work together.
you gotta fill in the gaps of how you
Mm.
feel about it, but they definitely never directly are like, yes. It's more I felt like in the game like they have a history that perhaps
Mm.
involved, if not romance, at least just like, physical connection, and just like
Mhm.
they're very, ride or die with one another. Like, yeah, like they'll do whatever for each other in this world that's like super fucked up. Like they're like, you know, each other's, ride or die, like I said. And it was cool to get more of like they're together. I think very obviously, they sleep
Mhm.
in the same bed together. The second Joel sees that she has like bruises on her face,
Mhm.
he's like ready to kill whoever did it. Which I liked, and I think that's definitely good that they like definitively were like, yes, this is th- their thing in this,
Right. Exactly. Hmm.
and I think going back to that, it shows like, okay, she doesn't consider the thief, I don't know, thieves, smugglers, whatever you want to call them, fellow lowlifes, to be that much of a threat, but she knows like the power that Fedra wields within, the thing. Like they can shoot Tess and just whatever. They don't have to like face
Exactly.
any repercussions. Like, oh, she was in the middle of a firefight. What could we do? Whatever. And then the Fireflies also seem like very extreme and very like, okay, they're not gonna, you know, look out for me in the middle of this firefight. They might shoot me. Like,
Yeah,
so I'm just like, she's in a bad situation, and it kind of shows those two groups kind of what they are in the world.
exactly. It's clearly like the power of authority and the terrorists. And
Yeah.
I'm stuck in the middle. Neither of them is going to
Yep.
stick their neck out for me. Um, yeah, and I gotta repeat this. I love just seeing Boston because you really only go through it like once, I think, in the game,
Mhm.
and then you're in apartments and stuff like that. But like in this, you're really like in a few different locations, and you
Mhm.
get a big better sense of that. And like being from Massachusetts, I'm just like I was like in my glories. I'm like, oh my god,
Yeah.
this is so cool, like the sets and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really cool. And it's so interesting to see, like all the decaying buildings, and
Hmm.
one building is literally just like in the game, leaned up on the side of another building because something
Yep.
happened. And hopefully we'll get to see the inside of that in the next episode. Um,
Hmm.
no spoilers from the games or anything, but it's certainly a interesting set piece nonetheless. But
Hmm.
yeah, other than that, I think obviously in the game you kill a lot of those guys who screwed over you with the battery. We don't see that. I thought this was kind of a cool way to like reintroduce um, the fireflies later, and then them just coming upon like the aftermath of something. And the fireflies are very interesting. Marlene has this plan. We're gonna do these attacks all over the city, draw Fedra away from where we need to go and where we're gonna like sneak out of. I thought that was super smart plan, actually. You know,
Hmm.
um, and it has the question like, why is Ellie tied to a radiator? Like, what is it
Hmm.
about this girl that has them, tied up? Obviously, you find out that Marlene knew her mother. Um, I did like the scene between them when Ellie was like, "What are you, my mom?" She's like, "No." Like
Yeah.
I knew your mom, and she's like, "Oh, okay, shit." So she like trusts her because of
Right.
that. Well,
Right.
also probably a little bit also like, okay, you didn't kill me immediately, so that makes sense. But yeah, kind of bring that all together. What do you think of the scene where like between Joel and Tess and Marlene and her like right hand woman there?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean Marlene, perfectly cast. Obviously, she's
Yes.
the actress who played in the
Yes.
game, and I mean, it just, yeah, it's literally perfect. I was like watching it, I'm like, yeah, no, that's like exactly what I wanted. Um, I think it's great. I mean, I really do. In a lot of ways, I feel like Neil Druckmann. He's known this material for years and years, and he's taking this show as an opportunity to be like, what can I retcon that makes a lot of sense with the characters. Having
Mm,
Joel not kill all these fireflies and like, you know, it to me it just makes a lot more sense. You're not playing a game where it's like it's all if it
yeah.
was all cutscenes, you'd be bored as hell. You of course
Yeah.
you want some action, you want some shooting. This makes more sense to me, and yeah, the inciting incident. Everyone's just there in the hallway. Joel throwing Ellie against the wall. It's like such a great intro. It's like
Yeah. Their
perfect.
their
Like,
first meeting is that.
it's like you realize like they're gonna butt heads. They're like maybe like too similar to each other in some ways,
Mm,
but it's just like that's gonna make it all the more satisfying as their like relationship develops and they get to know each other more
mm.
and yeah, I mean, obviously we know how it pans out in the game, but I won't spoil anything beyond that. But I thought it really worked. I mean, I did think it was a little weak having it be like, uh, you know, Marlene's right hand person being like, "I'll do it," and it's like, "No, your fucking ear's gone." It's like,
Yeah, they shot her
all
ear
right, I guess
off.
like, I guess that is
It
a
was
good
fucked.
reason, but like,
And Marlene straight up like is a champ because she's shot in the side this
oh
whole
yeah,
time, and
yeah,
she's still like negotiating all of
yeah.
this.
Yeah, so I was like laughing at that as well. Yeah, no, I like that scene a lot, and I think it 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 works given the
Mm,
context of it not being a playable video game, being
yeah,
a dramatic show.
yeah. No, I mean, so much of like the language of video games is violence, right? Like you pretty
Hmm.
much like in almost every game that's like a single player game, it's like what do? You kill enemies. That's
Yeah,
how you interface with the world. So it's
yeah,
nice to have like, you know, this because it does like the moment where Joel like kills that guy at the end wouldn't have hit as hard if you just see Joel like
not at all.
kill a bunch of people, because we to this point haven't seen Joel kill any person. Did kill the old woman with the wrench, of course. Did
Yeah,
run
but
people
she was
over with
already
a
a
car.
clicker, so like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but it's a little different to kill like a non-infected person.
And especially someone
Um,
he basically knew and was like
yeah, he
dealing
had a
with
rapport with him.
almost.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say a friend, but they were like kind of like
yeah,
joking around a
friendly.
bit and like,
Yeah,
yeah,
he was looking out for Joel. He was like, don't go out. Like all the shit's
exactly.
happening, so just keep yourself safe. And
Yeah, and I
yeah,
really feel like Druckmann is like this has been something that he's been thinking about since like the first game.
mm,
Obviously we know the premise of The Last of Us Part Two, and I think without going into too much detail about the story, um, the themes have a lot to do with that concept within a video game of like
mm,
it matters who you're killing. These people conceivably have friends and relationships within this world. They've survived as long as you for the most part. And like,
mm.
you know, it's not just, you're not just like killing 20 people that are nameless NPCs and moving on. And I think
Yeah,
that's a theme that we're going to see in this show as well in a lot of ways.
yeah. No, I mean, it's a good point. Like it should mean more when your main character kills someone, and that's like the weakness of video games in some ways.
Mhm.
Like not to talk about another Naughty Dog. Like okay, Last of Us, the world's really fucked. Talk about Uncharted. Like the main character of that is a mass murderer, straight up. Like,
It's like if Indiana Jones
yeah,
had like a million, it's like his body count was just like
yeah.
too high to count. Yeah.
But that's just like
It's like
what
ridiculous.
I don't know if it's a weakness or drawback, but when you're trying to tell a compelling story in
Mhm.
video games or like this, you're just kind of a prisoner to the medium in some ways, which is another reason why I say like this might be the better medium to tell this story in because you can have these impactful moments.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. Like within, I mean, even there are even some films where this could be a play, and I think that's a show of good storytelling. Not always, I think
Mm,
film is film for a reason, and video games are
yeah,
video games, and they each have their advantages. But when you have something that just works, that can work in almost any medium because the story speaks so strongly and it
mm,
comes first. I think that's a good sign, and I think that's exactly what The Last of Us is. Could the Last of
Yeah.
Us work as like a stage play? I don't know.
mm, no, no, it definitely
It's
can work.
definitely not. But it'd be kind of funny to see like a high school like really cheap like zero budget version.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Oh man, but yeah, so we get like a cool little scene that kind of expands on the game. Well, one it takes like pretty much shot for shot where Joe and Ellie are waiting to go till nighttime.
Mhm.
They have a little discussion. Points out that his watch broke, presumably when they got shot and he fell. The watch that Sarah fixed for him that he's
Mhm.
20 years later is not fixed or taken
Not
off.
taken
Like
off. Yeah.
just he holds on to that, and there's also like the addition of oh, who are Bill and Frank? Who are they? What does this music mean?
Mhm.
And Ellie's kind of able to play Joel a little bit and get him to like react. And I think that was cool. She gets the information for herself, for the audience as well.
Yeah.
That if there's 80s music, something bad is happening. Um, which was very fun, and like it was an adaptation of a scene from the game with more added to it. Like it's so good. It's such a good job.
Really clever. I thought it was a really clever scene, and it also shows that Ellie is clever. It's like
Yeah.
here's this kid, but she's not like totally useless.
Mm.
It's like okay, maybe she's not like Joel in terms of like strength, fucking,
Definitely not yet. Yeah.
but she actually has some smarts and just
Mm.
some wit, and yeah, I think we're gonna see more of that, and it's definitely become a trope in video games where like your sidekick is like
The
it's like God of War,
stuffy.
like it's your
Yeah.
son in there, or like Ellie or someone, and like they do a little bit of shooting and they help you
Mm.
out, or like Bioshock Infinite's another example. You know, the show's gonna have to show that in other ways, and I think this is like a great scene that kind of shows that off. It's like here's this character who's actually clever and
Mm.
potentially can help Joel even along the way.
Definitely. Yeah, I remember Ellie being one of the first video game companions that I didn't like immediately like hate because of like how useless and how much they got in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Really good job with that. But yeah, it's very interesting. We get a scene also pretty much shot for shot from the video game of them trying to avoid the Fedra agents and sneak out of the city. Very cool. I saw someone online said that when they get spotted by the Fedra agent, it plays like the little like music that plays in the game. Like, I haven't confirmed that, but if
Whoa,
that's true, that's cool. So,
that is
like
cool.
that a
Yeah.
lot. But yeah, we find out that Ellie is infected, and she's been infected for what, a week at this point.
I believe, yeah, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's enough for her wounds to heal, and
Mm-hmm.
like kind of scar over. And yeah, they didn't tell Joel and Tess about this. Not great, but they're kind of stuck with Ellie now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like we said, Ellie, in an effort to not get killed immediately by the Fedra agent, stabs him, taken just from the game. Joel kills him um, pretty brutally. Ellie, sees it. And, I saw that as one, her kind of being like, holy shit, like, I caused this. But another, I don't think anyone's ever done anything like this for Ellie, right? Like, no one's ever stepped up and defended her.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think she's just used to being like told what to do, these powers
Mm.
of authority, being in school, and like Joel's definitely a different beast from like any
Yeah.
of that. And I think, yeah, Bella Ramsey's reaction is really a nuanced. It's a nuanced expression. It's not just like total fear. It's not just
Mm.
like glee, because I think that would be
Yeah.
weird in either case.
Yeah. Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It is very good. All right. So that's the end of this episode. Obviously, it ends with an 80s song on the radio as they
Yeah.
walk off into,
Depeche Mode.
Boston. Yeah. So trouble is coming, as they say. But I wanted to get your opinion on a theory that I've seen going around Reddit,
Okay.
Twitter. I
Okay.
think it came from Reddit initially. I don't know the exact username. I'm sorry if unlikely that person watches this podcast. Is like that's my theory, but I want to be clear, not my theory. Taking this from smart people on the internet, but the theory is that the fungus was on contaminated flour, and the reason why Joel and Sarah don't get sick here is because they don't eat pancakes because they don't have any pancake mix. They don't take biscuits from the next door neighbors when they're
Oh,
offered. Sarah, Joel's on Atkins. That's a carb free
yeah.
diet. And then Sarah doesn't take the cookies because she doesn't like raisins later on. And you see the grandmother getting fed, biscuits earlier in the episode. She turns. maybe that's how it happened and how it gets so widespread immediately. I don't know if that's just like a little Easter egg
Yeah,
thing in the background, but I wanted to get your opinion on that.
I love that. I mean, it all it all checks out to me. I mean, yeah, the biscuits. I did think the biscuit was like a weird little thing.
Yeah, aside.
It explains it. It's I think
Yeah,
that's
and it come,
perfect.
it was from a place, where it gets distributed widely across the globe, so it's all happening at the same time, all like taking the
Mhm.
world by surprise at the
Yeah.
same time. I think it's very interesting. I loved it as a theory. Um, and if they never confirm it, that's fine. I think it's almost more fun to just have like, oh, maybe it was the flower, like maybe
I think that's yeah. I like it more too if it's just kind of like maybe they figured this out. Maybe they were just trying to survive this entire time, so they didn't
yeah,
like have scientists like figuring this shit out.
yeah,
But like it's a great that's a great theory.
yeah, and yeah, I think this was, as we said, like probably the best adaptation of a video game so far. One episode in, like
Mhm.
who knows? I would be very surprised if it suddenly dropped off a cliff after the
Yeah.
first episode. But yeah, no, cannot recommend this enough. Obviously, if you're listening to this at this point, you've watched it. You also probably enjoyed it, or you wouldn't have listened and sought out like a podcast to discuss it. But I think HBO has another potential mega hit. It's the highest rated premiere after House of the Dragon since like 2010. So like
Wow.
I think it's only going to grow, much like House of the Dragon like started with 10 million and then like grew to like over 20 million by the finale. I think the word of mouth of this is going to be really good and people are
Yeah.
gonna keep watching and like adding to it as it goes on.
Yeah. No, I think so too. And I went into this with like very high expectations. Like I usually don't. Like Brian, you know this about me.
Yeah,
I avoid trailers. I try to like keep my hopes down because I've been like disappointed in the past. But with this, I was just like, there's no way. Especially with Neil Druckmann so heavily involved.
mm,
I knew it was going to be true to the game and just excellent all around. And
yeah,
I agree. I do think this is going to be like their next big hit.
yeah,
And not to get too ahead of ourselves, but it's like, will they continue with adapting the second game? It's like
yeah,
you got to wonder, like, if this is so successful, like, how far are they
yeah.
going to
I
go with it?
Yeah, I don't expect. I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't
Mhm.
expect the first game to be told in this season. I think it will get probably about halfway. There's a certain
Yeah.
thing that we can talk about off air where I think they'll probably end the season. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
there's just so much like story, and they don't need to like speed run it, right? They can let it breathe
No.
and add stuff. You know.
Yeah. The only thing I guess would be Bella Ramsey like aging.
Hmm.
They'll probably want to shoot that much. So like finish the first game, and then if they decide to make the second game, of course they can wait a few years because that makes
Yeah.
sense with Ellie. But yeah, I mean, the only thing is like, I'm sorry if you haven't watched the trailer, don't listen to this part, but in the trailer, it shows them in like the snowier
Yeah.
areas, and we even see like, I think we see, uh, what's his name, Nolan's character,
Yeah.
and that's sort of end game. So that's why I'm almost like, yeah, I wonder like how they would if they were gonna cut the season off like there, what would a season two really be? Or
Mm.
maybe they would go into more detail with like, you know, Fedra or yeah, it's a good question, but I was surprised that they showed a lot of that stuff in the trailer. I
Yeah.
was like, wow, that's late game.
Right.
We'll see.
Yeah. 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 We'll have to see. But for now, amazing. Can't wait to talk about it going forward. We're gonna have other guests from the extended We Could Get Everything universe on as this goes, but we wanted the first one to be us talking about it. And yeah, other than that, thank you so much for checking this out. And please subscribe to the channel, rate us on iTunes if you enjoyed it. I don't know if you have anything you want to plug, Tamar.
Just watch our YouTube stuff, I guess.
Please watch our YouTube stuff. It's
Watch
Wicked
us.
Good Everything, Better Radio, and Wicked Good Sports. If you're a sports fan, check that out. But other than that, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.